Okay, I'd like to call the May 26th, 2026 Planning Commission regular meeting to order. The Planning Commission is holding hybrid meetings. Members of the public can attend the meeting in person or observe the meeting on Zoom online by visiting www.cityofarcata.org and following the live meetings link at the bottom of the city's homepage, or on the city's YouTube channel. If you are attending remotely, please be aware that the Zoom feed provides the closest to real-time stream. If you rely on the other feeds and you wish to make comments, please be aware of this time lag on those feeds. The first item on our agenda is the land acknowledgement. The City of Arcata acknowledges that the lands we are located on are the unceded ancestral lands of the Wiyot tribe. The land that Arcata rests on is known in the Wiyot language as Gude Ni, meaning over in the woods or among the redwoods. Past actions by local, state, and federal governments remove the Wiyot and other indigenous peoples from the land and threaten to destroy their cultural practices. The City of Arcata acknowledges the Wiyot community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. This acknowledgement seeks to aid in dismantling the legacy narratives of settler colonialism. David, will you please call roll?
Yeah, Commissioner Tagney?
Here.
Commissioner Lehman?
Here.
Commissioner Ham?
Here.
And Chair Simmons?
Here.
And for the record, Vice Chair Abby Strickland is not present today.
And I will note that we are joined today by Community Development Director David Loya, Senior Planner Dilo Freitas, and Kelsey Flederick, Planner 2. Next on our agenda, we have early oral communications. During this time, people may make comments about items that are not on the agenda. If you wish to speak on one of our agenda items, you will have an opportunity when we are discussing those items. If you have comments about items that are not listed on our agenda today, please line up now behind the lectern. If you are on Zoom and you wish to make comments on matters that are not on today's agenda, please raise your hand by selecting the raise hand icon on the right side of your screen or by pressing *9 on your phone. The clerk will unmute you when it is your turn to speak. With that, I'd like to open public comment. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to comment during early oral communications. Please feel free to state your name for the record. And may we have the first speaker, please? We have no one in the room and no one online. With that, I'm going to close early oral communications. Next on our agenda is the consent calendar. We have one item on consent, which is to approve Planning Commission meeting minutes from our regular meeting held on May 12th, 2026. Would any commissioner like to pull this item, or do I have a motion?
I move we accept the minutes.
I'll second that.
And Chair, if I may, I realized that recently, in the recent past, we started taking public comment on the consent calendar at the City Council meeting, and I realize that we have not implemented that at the Planning Commission. I believe it's a Brown Act requirement is what our legal team has advised us. So if you would please take public comment on the consent calendar as well.
Happy to do so.
Thank
you. Does anyone in the room have public comment on our consent calendar? The one item on consent are our minutes from last meeting. And does anyone online have public comment on this item? Okay. With that, I will close public comment on the consent calendar. We have a motion and a second. Should we redo that since it was before the public comment was open?
Sure. I move that we approve the minutes of last meeting.
And I'll second that.
All right. We have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Our first public hearing this evening is to consider approving Gateway Use Permit, Gateway Design Review Permit for Yurok Natural Resource Center interior and exterior renovations and site improvements at 820 N Street, file number 256009 DRMUP. Can we please begin with a staff report?
Yes, here we go. Okay, so this is the design review and gateway use permit for the Yurok Natural Resource Center at 820 N Street, and this is going to be our first Gateway District project, so it's very exciting. Staff recommends that you receive the staff report, public comment, and then approve the design review and use permit by adopting CEQA exemption 15061, the common sense exemption in attachment A, and the action with findings of approval and conditions of approval in the plan set. A little bit about the project site and zoning. This is 820 N Street in the black box. It's zoned for commercial mix within the Gateway Hub District. Its existing use is an industrial non-conforming use, and the surrounding uses are a mix of mixed use and industrial. So the proposed use is the Yurok Natural Resource Center, which under the Gateway Code is classified as a professional business office, which is permitted, and a research and development center, which is also permitted as an industrial or light industrial use. So the permits required for this project would include the Gateway Design Review and Use Permit. These are a catch-22. Anytime you're going to have a non-conforming feature or you don't provide residential, you're going to have to do both a gateway and a gateway design review and use permit. And there's additional findings for those non-conforming findings, which I'll go into now. So the gateway area plan identifies proposals for how to handle these non-conforming uses, but overall, the plan's objective is to create mixed-use, multi-story, high-density housing with a broad diversity of non-residential uses that are pedestrian-friendly. And for non-conforming uses, the Gateway Area Policy GA1B identifies relocating incompatible uses. So for the incompatible uses in the Gateway District, there's an option to relocate them somewhere more compatible within the plan area. And then GA1C for non-conforming uses, conditions, and structures to allow the existing non-conforming uses to remain unless specifically targeted for relocation. When new development occurs, encourage non-conforming uses to become non-conforming, and in some cases, require relocation and incentives. And then the Gateway Code supports this with the following findings. So if it's eligible for a ministerial permit, which means you comply with the form-based code and you provide residential housing, then you don't need to go through this. But if not, then you have to do the Gateway Design Review and Gateway Use Permit, and you have to make additional non-conforming findings. So is the non-conforming use on the same parcel? Is it not heavy industrial? And are there off-site mitigation measures proposed? This scope of work is proposing enhanced landscaping throughout the site, the removal of an existing building, which is identified as Building C, the creation of a courtyard, paving and new pedestrian improvements, and then modifications mostly to Building A and some to Building B. So this is this lovely photo of what they're proposing. So we have the landscape improvements on 8th, 9th, and N Street. And then this is that courtyard area that they're proposing with a fire pit. And then they're also expanding these bulb outs on N and 8th and N and 9th. And this is the proposed interior renovations with the removal of Building C where the courtyard area is proposed. Buildings B and D are primarily going to be used for storage of the research equipment like boats and vehicles. And then phase 2 of development will be partitioning Building A into these office spaces that you can see here. It's a little hard to read, but. And this is a snapshot of what they're proposing. So the exterior modifications to Building A. This is the west entry elevation on N Street, and then the east elevation. So this is from the internal, or from the, like where the courtyard perspective would be. And then these are the sides of the structures. And so now we're gonna do a little gateway primer because there was a lot of information going through the form-based code and how it applied to this project. So as I mentioned, this project is located in the Gateway Hub. The purpose of this district is to create mixed-use, walkable developments, and this is identified as a major corridor for the Gateway District. There's specific standards that apply to active frontage, how the main entrance to a building should be perceived, pedestrian realm improvements, which is how the external frontage, walkways, and amenities look in front of the structure, the form standards, and then if you're going to deviate from the form-based code, the gateway use permit conditions. Okay, so these are the specific form-based code standards that the project is deviating from. Since they are not proposing, or since they're proposing modifications to the existing structures, there are going to be a lot of non-conforming features that we did review for this project. So in regards to placement, height, and massing, the project does not meet the maximum 20-foot setback on either of the building frontages. There is no upper story step back because it is a one-story structure. And there are no building modulations. However, the project does include design articulations to give the general view of like breaking up that boxy massing. And then non-residential transparency, there's a requirement for 65% transparency on the frontage. What they've proposed is 35%. And this is a 200-foot long facade. There's two requirements for the entrance frequency. For office spaces, which this includes office spaces, it's 1 per 50 feet. And for entrance frequencies for non-residential, it's 1 per 100. And they've only proposed 2 entrances. And then another one being the sign area. The sign area design standards pull from the land use code, so these are the same standards that we've been reviewing for signs. There's 20 square feet maximum per business, and 100 square feet per parcel. What they proposed is a 50 square foot sign area, because this is a 200. Yeah, so it would be proportional to the building frontage. Okay, so now we're going to get into the design of the pedestrian realm improvements, and I'm going to pass this off to David.
Before we jump into the next set of standards, I just want to check and see if there are any questions about what we've presented thus far. Doing good. Okay, we'll keep trucking. And I do want to acknowledge this is fairly heavy lift that Kelsey has done to bring these standards. We've had a lot of internal conversation. Dilo, myself, our deputy director, have been very engaged in all of these conversations. This being the first project that takes concept and actually tries to map it onto reality. And so it's been a learning process for all of us. The applicants have been very understanding of the process as well, and really have done a great job, with their first design to try and accommodate all of the nuances of the gateway. What you see here is an image from the gateway area plan. And so the plan established the vision, the code established the standards to try and implement the vision. What you see here is one-way couplets between 9th and 8th Streets. And so you'd be able to travel in a counterclockwise orientation down 9th Street, in Street, and back 8th Street in the future. Obviously, right now, those are two-way streets. We don't have the parking layout. We don't have the sidewalk layout. We do have typicals. You can see, carve-outs here that explain what was drawn in these conceptual diagrams. But the actual road is not laid out yet. In addition to that, the project that's before us isn't a new build that's 100% consistent with the the vision of the plan area. It's not making the kinds of investments that we had envisioned for the types of pedestrian realm improvements that we wanted to see. And so we're trying to find something that works with the level of investment that's being proposed here, and also the lack of real specific designs that we have currently. But what we do have is specificity in the gateway code as to what the what the design should ultimately look like. And so moving from this conceptual model.
Is it the ultimate plan to have the one-way couplets?
The ultimate plan, as identified in the gateway plan, is to have one-way couplets westbound on 9th Street, southbound on N, and then eastbound on 8th Street. And so the parking configuration, the ability to add in protected bike lanes, all of these things that you see here are contingent on having one-way roads with one travel lane, additional parking areas, and the rest of that committed to wider pedestrian walkways, up to 8 feet in some areas, up to 12 feet in others. And then in this instance, some active frontage amenities.
So we can assume that's what it's going to look like eventually?
At some point in the future, that's the plan.
David, we already have the one-way couplets up to I Street, correct?
Correct. Yeah, this would be a continuation across K Street of the one-way couplets of 8th and 9th that go currently by either side of the co-op. Okay, so that was looking in plan view from the top, looking, as a cross section through the side, you would see something like this on these active frontage types where, maybe you have a building, and in front of that building, there's this active frontage. This is what's called for around 8th and 9th Street here. An 8-foot clear sidewalk with 4 additional feet, so 12 feet of sidewalk frontage before you get to the street. This is the active frontage standard that they're trying to meet. So with all of these, standards, when we develop them, the idea was you're going to come in, you're going to clear the site, start fresh, build fresh, and then be able to attain these different setbacks. They obviously don't have a, complete tear down rebuild. And so we have to get a little creative. What's being proposed here, is that the sidewalk is largely proposed to remain as it is in place. Currently, it's between 5 and 4.5 feet, depending on what street you're on. 6 feet on in street, but they are adding those bulb outs that you saw in the plan view of the project. So they're trying to anticipate the broader bulb outs at the crossings. Ultimately that will all be infilled with nice wide sidewalks. And they're not proposing any amenity zone that they will build any amenity zone at this time. And so the street is largely as it currently stands. You would see it in the future, when they after their build is done. It wouldn't look any different except for the bulb outs on the sides here. And a little bit of continuation of that as you see here. But we currently have, I'm not sure what the next slide looks like. Okay, so we currently have, 50-foot wide right-of-way. So what we did was we essentially took that plan, that conceptual model, and then looked at what's in the standard for both sides of the street. There's active frontage on both sides of the street, and then anticipated what would happen if in the future everything is built out. What will we need to accommodate that full plan build out? Right now, they have a landscaping strip, and they're doing a very nice job of landscaping. The proposed landscaping here is, there are very few projects that come in with this amount of detail and attention to landscaping. The variety of plants that are being put in here, this is a very, very nice job of landscaping. And so, that is in a lot of ways an amenity right from the start.
David, is green the existing?
Green is the proposed landscaping.
So it's going to shrink from what it presently is?
Well, not in the immediate build. This is what you see on the plan set is what they're proposing. But how do we get to that active frontage type in the future is kind of what we're leading up to here. We've got the existing sidewalks, with the sizes that they're built out at. And then this is showing the proposed in and 9th Street and in and 8th Street bulb outs at 8.5 and 10 feet respectively. And what we're suggesting in the conditions of approval, and we need to verify that it's written correctly, is that we get about a 6-foot easement along 8th and 9th Streets to allow for the standard as it's described in the current gateway code, so that if the city comes in and has a project and we can add those features, or if the adjacent parcel comes in and puts in, a $50, $75, $100 million project, and we asked them, we want you to wrap that, that frontage around the entire block, that we already have the rights to do that. At this point, we're not proposing to actually build anything on the property, but to secure the easements so that in the future you can build. Now, we've estimated, Kelsey and I have gone back and forth, and I've got my chicken scratch here that I can hopefully answer any questions about how we got to the 6 feet. But what we're asking is for a little bit of flexibility that the city engineer would ultimately establish what that easement is, based on a little bit more work that we could do to flesh out what the design would look like. But we're approximating 6 feet on 8th and 9th Streets.
What is the blue area?
The blue area is the area that we're proposing for public right-of-way.
So I'm asking, what's it going to look like when the project is finished?
Currently, it's going to look as they've proposed it. What we're going to recommend is that they don't put, expensive woody species in that setback area, and that they may want to modify their plan to accommodate some future development there. We don't have any plans. I don't have a source of funds. I don't even have real well-defined plan set of what the future would look like. All I know from the conceptual plans and from the Gateway Code is that we're going to need about 6 feet to accommodate what's planned.
I get it, but so the blue area will be landscaped.
Today, they'll landscape it, yeah.
Yeah.
And the way this might affect the project is you see they've got a proposed storage locker here for some recycling and solid waste. It might be prudent to move that back a little bit so that if the amenity zone is built out, it doesn't interfere with that public amenity zone. But we're not proposing to build the public amenity zone now, and we don't have a concept of when that would happen. So for all I know, they put this landscaping in, and it looks like landscaping for the next 20 years.
Last question. I don't want to belabor this, but if you get your one-way couplets in the future, you have a 50-foot right-of-way presently. Does that typically accommodate the goals that you just showed us the graphic on with the public-facing sidewalk and the 50? It fits within the 50 feet.
It does not.
It does not.
It does not
So
fit
on
within-
each parcel, we'll be having similar dialogue with the applicant.
Yeah, so if you recall from the Gateway Area Plan or from the code itself, actually has a really nice graphic that shows an imaginary property line falling somewhere in the public realm. And it really is going to be dependent on the parcel, and we can probably pull that up and show you, but it's really going to be dependent on the parcel. We have about 64 feet in these active frontage areas of road, bike, sidewalk, and amenity space and active frontage space. So if you line those out from one side of the street to the other, it's about 64 feet. We have 50 feet of public right-of-way now. And so there was always the plan that these new projects as they came in were going to contribute to that more vibrant public right-of-way. There were two main reasons for this. One is because we're anticipating taller buildings. Taller buildings, wider setbacks from buildings creates more space and eliminates and alleviates some of those concerns that we have about shading. So giving a little bit wider public right-of-way, in fact, accommodates some of the space that you need to have those taller buildings and not feel like you're completely closed in. And the other thing was that there's, right now, most sidewalks in the city of Arcata, you're lucky to have 5 feet, and many of them have a telephone pole right in the middle of them. So you got, if you're lucky, 3 feet of clear on the outside of that or inside of that telephone pole. What we're trying to do here is to make really nice public spaces, starting with the sidewalks. Mm-hmm. So just to kind of sum up this portion of it, the pedestrian realm as it's identified in the Gateway Code, which includes a landscape amenity. The street side would be on this side. in this image. So a landscape amenity going back from the curb, and those would have places to park your bikes, maybe some benches, some trees planted and that sort of thing. You'd have an 8-foot wide sidewalk, and then the active frontage is intended to be used as, kind of a flex space where, the businesses might put tables and chairs to have, customers sit and enjoy a beverage or whatever. Any questions about the easements that we're asking for at this stage? So we're not asking the applicant to build anything. We're just asking them to allow us to have space to build it in the future when we have the ability to do so.
And wrapping up, so the project, the design review and gateway use permit does require quite a few findings. A lot of them are duplicative, but we reviewed for the use permit. They were the standard use permit findings for the land use code listed here. And then the specific gateway code findings will not impede redevelopment of the surrounding properties, which it complies, it doesn't. And minor in nature contributes to the vibrancy of the gateway area, and the applicant has put in so much work to make this a very vibrant development. And the design review findings are the same as we have reviewed for the land use code, with the only addition being alternative methods achieve intent of deviation of standards. So although they're deviating, does it still meet the intent of the gateway district? And staff finds that it does. Did you want to add to that? Okay. So the biggest part of this project's non-conformance is the lack of residential. There is no residential proposed, and there's no anticipation for residential uses to be proposed. So that's the biggest one. But the other non-conforming use permit findings include on the same parcel, which it is not a heavy industrial use, and off-site mitigation impacts, or off-site impact mitigation. And as for the CEQA compliance, staff found that it meets the common sense CEQA exemption. The site is listed on a Cortese list, but after communication with the Regional Water Quality Board and the Department of Humboldt County Health and Human Services, they reviewed the proposed project and they didn't have any issue with it. They just asked that the project comply with the existing soil management plan and no further environmental review is needed. So the conditions of approval for this project include that soil, groundwater contingency management plan and waste diversion planning. So the applicant shall prepare and implement the contingency plan addressing the potential soil or groundwater disturbances with coordination with the Regional Water Quality Board, and the applicant shall submit a construction operation waste diversion plan consistent with the city requirements to the Environmental Services Department. The applicant shall submit a drainage plan to Environmental Services before the issuance of a building permit, and the public access easement that we discussed today shall be recorded prior to the certificate of occupancy. And the last one is air quality. So the Arcata 2045 general plan eliminated or prohibited the installation of wood burning appliances in new construction for commercial and industrial uses. So a condition of approval that we discussed is that the applicant shall not install any wood burning appliances or open flame wood burning fixtures. This would include the fire pit that they propose in the courtyard on the project site for the life of the permit. Yeah.
So you're saying there is no fire pit? Because earlier you mentioned the fire pit.
Yeah.
If I could just jump in real quick, what I would say is that the proposal includes a fire pit in the courtyard area. Would really like the applicants to speak to that. I will note that the fire pit is not a wood burning appliance. It doesn't specifically conform to that, what was explicitly dealt with in the general plan. And so, I would say if it was a wood stove for heating the interior of the space, we'd have a pretty strong recommendation for, denying that. I think there's some discretion here, and I think it'd be good to hear from the applicant.
And last slide. So lastly, staff recommends that you approve the design review permit and the gateway use permit for the Yurok Natural Resource Campus by adopting the CEQA exemption for the common sense exemption, the action and finding of approval, the conditions of approval, and the approved plan set. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other clarifying questions before I open it up to public comment? Yeah.
I wondered if you can explain a little bit more how you find it consistent even though it doesn't meet the housing requirements? Like, what's the justification there?
The hazard requirements for a categorical exemption.
No, specifically, I mean, I don't remember the phrasing that you used, but it was something like that we find the project consistent with the gateway area, like intent of the gateway area, with the exception of not fulfilling the housing. And so I was curious.
The housing.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said hazards. Yeah, so there were two pathways for non-conforming uses in the gateway that we embedded. One was if someone was proposing something that didn't conform to the standards, but otherwise achieved all the objectives. And so that was one pathway. The other pathway that we created and was in order to protect existing businesses, to allow existing non-conforming businesses to expand and not need to meet those other requirements of the Gateway Code. So this was, specifically envisioned, certainly discussed, and there was what I would consider light nonconformity in the Gateway Code that was implemented specifically for these purposes. So even though it doesn't provide the housing that's required to meet the ministerial pathway, there's nothing in the Gateway Code that prohibits projects that don't have housing.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to open up public comment. Since this is a public hearing on a discretionary item, the applicant may go first. We will not limit your time, but we ask that you be succinct. The public will then have the opportunity to comment on the project. Speakers will be limited to 3 minutes each. The applicant will have the opportunity to comment or rebut any statements when all public comment is complete. Applicants on quasi-judicial matters are afforded this full due process to ensure fairness. I don't know if this is full due process, this extra level of due process. When I open public comment at large, and if you are in person, please feel free to line up behind the lectern. If you are on Zoom, please raise your hand by selecting the raise hand icon on the right side of your screen or by pressing *9 on your phone. The clerk will unmute you when it is your turn to speak. Feel free to state your name for the record. Can we please begin with the applicant?
I just want to acknowledge for the applicant team as well that we have several folks online that are part of your team or presenting or representing the Yurok tribe as well. And so I'm not sure, you'll have to let me know how you want to manage the folks that are online.
I was planning on just opening up the main points, and if there may be some of the applicants that just want to share their appreciation for the project. And I also have Julian Berg, the architect, if you guys have any questions about the character and design of the building.
Okay, so maybe if I could ask folks that are online that are part of the project team representing the Yurok tribe or are with the Yurok tribe, if you could just go ahead and raise your hands if you intend to speak, and I'll end up unmuting you, and then you can join as it seems like it's necessary.
Is this where I'm supposed to come? Just let me know when I'm ready to go. Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Praj White, and I'm with North Point Consulting Group. I'm very grateful to have been able to work with the Yurok Tribe, their Natural Resources Campus team, and the Yurok Tribe Construction Corporation. We teamed with Points West, Julian Berg, and our office to help bring this project to this point and bring it to share with the commission today for your consideration. I first just kind of wanted to go ahead and thank first the client for actively participating and looking out for what they wanted to see. They really set out to have a presence in Arcata to house their natural resource campus. I can't go into exact detail of that groups, but they study a lot of natural resources from fish and flora and fauna, and they collect a whole lot of data within the community. And they're looking for a safe, secure, well-connected internet and modernized office space. And so they found themselves here in Arcata. And, you know, they came in and so first I wanted to thank them. I want to thank Points West did a great job on the surveying, getting us really clear on where this building sets, and working with Julian, who had a very attentive ear to our client. So with that, and I guess I want to extend my thanks to staff. Ended up met several times with public works staff, with planning staff, with David, and really trying to understand this code and move forward. And I think that kind of the greater challenges came around having existing facilities on the site versus the Vision Gateway hub district. And so I appreciate how staff went out to identify those deviations. And as I was helping guide and bring the project forward, you know, the continued uses was really kind of the core of the focus of our guiding through that code. So we really saw that it was really professional office space and business, and that's really what the tribe intends to have go forward. So kind of mentioned what the tribe's goal was. They really guided us and wanted to have a place that they could have pride in and invest. If you look at some of the architectural drawings, you have the entrance on N Street, and you have the classic kind of redwood plank structure that you may see up in the Yurok area. You have the round entry door, goes through security entrance area, and you see through to a large conference room, and it's set with sliding glass doors and open, so that, you know, there may be that, you know, there's a lot of pride there. They could actually hold and host a tribal council meeting here on this property, and it may work for them. When you come to that front door and you look through, that opens up and you can see right through to the courtyard, just the way that the property lines up. And so just wanting to address the fire pit, the idea was that maybe there would be an event where they would hold tribal council, and maybe they would want to have a salmon barbecue and share that. So the fire pit it's an ask, but it's a rare ask to fit with kind of the cultural experience of housing those meetings. So if there's some simple exemption for that ability, it's not intended to be a gas stove and people hang out outside and stay warm around a fireplace. It's set to be very specific for the yacht's experience and the use of the building. Wanted to touch in on those items, and also wanted to touch in on the right-of-way. I mentioned Points West in the surveying, so you guys had a couple questions about the easements and how things fit. And so when the design and documents we've submitted, we scratched our heads a lot of times on making sure that from center line of right-of-way to face a curb, that the one-way street, the diagonal parking, the bike lane, and all those things actually fit exactly right within that street. So you don't end up moving curb line anywhere, and those pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicle functions all work exactly within the street. It's once you get to the back of walk that there's some deviation of the size of sidewalk, the positioning of landscaping, and how that fits together. So I really think that the question of, you know, does this project with the bulb outs anticipate the type of parking and the type of transportation modes that will happen? Yes, it does. And the easements reserve the right for in the future if the active frontage or wider sidewalks become necessary, or to be fitting and consistent with the other development in the area. You know, just following the codes, the driveways, the site is getting upgraded for accessibility so that there'll be bypasses or excuse me, not bypasses, we'll actually ramp down the driveways in a way that someone who's accessibly challenged will be able to stay within the sidewalk footprint. And so it ends up that we are modernizing quite a bit of sidewalk, dealing with, as David mentioned, there are fire hydrants and power poles and things that we have to accommodate and not only get accessibility by, but wider walkways. And so, and then Magically, we have it designed so it all drains. If you're aware, it's very flat down in that part of town. And so we have very little thresholds to get the gradient. So we've fine-tuned accessibility and drainage. Some of the challenges that come up in considering those wider sidewalks is you have the structure already close to the sidewalk. And so you end up having to change structure elevations and different things to accommodate that. So we were able to have a great chat with staff and really dig into all of those issues. And on top of the required changes for accessibility, then the landscaping and the commitment from this applicant kind of shows in the application package that they're really committed to doing a great job. And I think it'll be something everybody can be proud of to see this first gateway project move forward. That's really, I think I could try to answer the couple of questions that I heard as you guys were going through. Like I said, there is additional staff on the call that if you guys have some questions, try to field them. But that's all I had for my presentation. So thank you for hearing it out, and look forward to any questions or your approval of the project this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the applicant team online who would like to speak?
Can anybody hear me? Julian Bird.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Julian.
Oh, hello, David and staff and team. I'm sitting here in my car, which is not a typical architect thing to do because I like to point and click and do my show there in person. But here we are. I'm traveling to meet family for a gathering here, so apologize I'm not there. But Raj did a great job communicating some of the architectural elements. I just wanted to say a few words about the project. I'm really honored to be working on it with the Yurok tribe and North Point Consulting. It's really a fantastic project for the city. You know, and as Kelsey went into, this is an adaptive reuse of the existing office light industrial complex, which poses challenges because we were stuck with the footprints of these buildings and trying to make it work with a fairly complex program that the tribe presented to us. And it wasn't an easy task to arrive at the design we have, but through many meetings with the tribe, we came up with a layout that was going to work really well for them and provide the office space they need, the meeting space, a nice entry, and lobby space, restrooms, and then of course the light industrial areas for the equipment storage and vehicular parking behind secure gates, and then also future expansion space. So they are just thrilled with this layout, and it's going to work beautifully for them for the long haul. They of course anticipate being here for decades to come, and they're also really excited being part of Arcata and near Cal Poly Humboldt. There's a lot of synergy that could happen there, and I know you've all seen the architectural drawings, so I won't go into too much about that, but we worked hard to create sort of a plank house look to it that would give a real feel for or honor the signature of the Yurok tribe and something they're going to be proud to work in. We have the plank look siding, a stepped roof to break up the mass of the large building, redwood beam and knee brace details. There's lots of windows for natural light, skylight features. And of course, David mentioned the landscape plan is quite extensive. We're using all native landscaping, and we work closely with one of the tribal members who specializes in native planting and landscapes to help create this vision for the layout. So that's really, and I'm here to answer any questions that you may have, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Dean.
Yeah, good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Dean Beck. I'm the project manager for the Yurok Tribe Construction Corporation. I'm here to respectfully ask for your yes vote on the Gateway Use Permit and Gateway Design Review Permit for the Yurok Natural Resource Campus. The project is a reuse of existing light industrial buildings. We're not adding significant mass. We are improving what's already there, upgrading Building A's facade, removing an old shed to create a shared courtyard, and adding low-impact, culturally informed landscaping that exceeds Gateway standards and uses native drought-tolerant species important to the Yurok people. The campus will support up to 39 employees initially, natural resource professionals working on water quality, wetlands, air quality, climate resilience, condor reinduction, and salmon habitat, while implementing the bicycle facilities consistent with the Gateway Area Plan. We respectfully request your approval. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. So I'm going to open it up to general public comment now. Members of the general public will have 3 minutes each to comment on this item. If you're in person and would like to comment, please line up behind the lectern. And if you're on Zoom, please raise your hand or press *9. No one in person? Anyone on Zoom? Okay. With that, I'm going to close public comment on this item and move to our discussion. Would anyone like to begin with anything?
Sure. Thanks for this project. This is a wonderful project, and welcome to Arcata. In my role at the Shot Center, I've worked with the Yurok tribe for over a decade, and I'm real glad that they're coming down here near to where we are. I think the design is great. I have two concerns. One has to do with the fire pit, and I understand the cultural need to have the fire pit and to use it for activities that are culturally appropriate. It is, I mean, David, you pointed out it's not a wood stove. It's worse than a wood stove to have an open fire. I think that if it's used infrequently, it's fine. If it were used frequently, I think that wouldn't be good for the city. I think it would add to the air pollution that we have, especially in the winter here. So I don't know what to suggest really about that. I'm open to suggestions. So that's the one concern I have. The second concern is associated with the wash water from the boat storage. So in the conditions, it says that the floor drain shall not be used to discharge boat washdown water into the sewer without prior review and approval by the city. And, you know, if we're going to make that CEQA exemption, it's really important that invasive species don't get introduced. I mean, it could be a disaster. So how are we, I mean, what's really going to happen if that boat comes back from some kind of research activity? I mean, is the city going to be there every time they wash the boat? I'm worried about that. It could be environmentally bad if an invasive species was introduced. And I'm not quite sure how this is really going to work in real life. You know, 5 years from now, is every time the boat gets washed down, is it going to be checked? And how is it going to be checked? And I'm a little uncertain about that. So those are my two concerns. Otherwise, I think it's a fabulous project, and you know, thanks. It's a great first gateway project.
So I'm going to start with the first concern, the air quality. When we put this in the general plan, I was really thinking about indoor air quality and sort of indoor heating and indoor heating appliances. And so I guess I wasn't personally envisioning an outdoor fire pit as the kind of thing that this section would be prohibiting. And then even if it is being prohibited by this, I personally feel that this would be a good example of a place to give an exception given the cultural use. You know, the applicant said it would be used infrequently. You know, that's my personal preference on that one. And so maybe we can hear from our other two commissioners on that particular issue before we move on to the other one.
Yeah, on the fire pit, I'm all for the exception for this project. And it does seem like infrequent use. I would be disappointed if it was like a forever, presence in the neighborhood down there putting smoke up. But the tradition of the salmon bake and all that goes on with the tribe is so renowned. I can't imagine that this isn't a place where that option, at least ceremonially, should be able to occur.
I agree. But let me just say, air quality outside is an issue in Arcata. And wood smoke is dangerous. It smells good, but it's poisonous.
I'm fine with the ceremonial fire use. I think it's a fine exception, in my opinion.
Okay, so that's one note to you guys, is we're not going to be not allowing the wood fire pit. On your second concern, does staff have any comments on the boat washing?
I'll ask Kelsey, because I think you had direct conversations with our environmental services team.
Yeah, so in the request for comments, our environmental services team requested that I include that as a condition, and it wouldn't be that they're checking it every time. It's that there is a certain drainage plan that they need to submit to show that invasive species would not be introduced into the sewer, and I don't know the specifics on what that drainage plan looks like, but there's a process, it seems like, to do so.
Is there anyone from the applicants team who could speak on this? Yeah.
Thank you for giving me a chance to add to that. You know, the nature of bringing vehicles and trailers and boats around is that you get a lot of mud and different things fall off of it. And so this floor drain is not intended to be the location where boats are washed and cleaned out. It's incidental to cleaning the floor and the situation that occurs in there. And so when we're talking about a floor drain for boat wash, it's really for cleaning up the floor due to the issues of bringing equipment in and out. And that, it isn't intended that this is where you come wash your car, wash your boat out, or clean things. The intention is that we want to keep a clean garage because right next to it is going to be storage for the survey equipment and batteries and field data collecting equipment. And so it's about keeping a good, clean environment for the storing of the boats and facilities. So, as there could be a condition, I think it was read that you'd have to get additional approval from the city in order to use it as a wash rack, if you will. But that's not the intent. The intent is that you need to clean up your floor once in a while because you've been coming and going during inclement weather, and just kind of pull everything out and you have a floor drain to wash it out. So does that answer the question a little bit?
I think so. And then there was also our environment services are adding some sort of catchment device to that floor drain in addition.
Yeah, I think that's if it's intended to be used in that way. I think when we sent out the referral, there was a question mark among environmental services staff. We have the same types of concerns with the, car wash. And you have to add, separators to intercept those. And I think, I don't know if there's anybody on the UROC team that can speak to this, but, this is a highly professional organization that has, very thorough, processes to ensure that they're not, migrating invasive species. This is something that's also regulated by, Fish and Wildlife. There's a lot of regulations around it. I agree 100% with Commissioner Lehman that, if we were to create a land use that were, somehow introducing invasive species to the bay, that would be a travesty. But I just don't think that the nature and the types of operations that the UROC Natural Resources Division, conducts are, of that nature. And, typically you have to wash down as soon as you leave the water. There's a boat wash down area. And I don't know if there's anyone who can speak to that tonight, but I think that would be typical. So there's a both and. On the one hand, typical practices that, ensure that the boats are maintained in a way that they're not transporting invasive species on the one hand, and then also on the other hand, if they were to use this facility in that way, our Environmental Services Department want to make sure that they have the right types of interceptors to protect the treatment plant and the bay ultimately.
Does that help satisfy your concern, Peter?
I guess. The review and approval by the city seems still vague to me. I'd like to know more about it. I'm sure the Yurok Fisheries Department will be careful. I'm sure. It's just that, history is full of people who were being careful and, there were inadvertent species introduced. So I'm nervous about it, but I guess I'll say okay.
Go ahead.
I do have one of the project team online that maybe is wanting to address this. So let me unmute them and go ahead, DJ.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, great. I just wanted to thank the commission and the project team, North Point and Julian Berg and the rest of the project team for really supporting this project. I'm with the Fisheries Department. I'm a project engineer, and just wanted to address some of the concerns by the board regarding the boat wash. Everything that staff has said, and again, I want to thank staff for their thorough support on this project and continued support throughout the application period. But yes, we are very concerned about the transfer of invasive species. We do everything we can to mitigate that from cleaning the boat prior to transport. So we're discharging anything at the point source. We follow environmental standards and compliance regulations very thoroughly and very committed to that, and we would not want to transfer any of that to the city of Arcata by any means. So Praj is correct about the use of the floor drains. Staff and David's explanation of the environmental consideration was correct as well, but I just wanted to voice in be an advocate to let the commission know that we're very committed to making sure that we're following environmental compliance standards and we'll continue to do so and follow recommendations from staff and from others to make sure that we're doing that. But yes, and we can provide specific mitigation measures to the commission as needed, but and staff, but I just wanted to assure you that we're committed to mitigating those resources.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Lehman, I'm sort of looking to you because, yeah.
I'm fine. I'm ready to approve.
Okay. Did anyone else have any other comments or concerns on this item?
I just want to appreciate the project.
And did you, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a fabulous project, and I have great appreciation for the UROC work from salmon to condors to dam removal, restoration. There's just so much going on, and for them to choose Arcata for this wonderful project is just great. great for the community. And it is a bit of a blighted property, and I think in terms of Gateway future, this is a cool thing to have down there and helps flesh out that neighborhood. You know, it's got the whole creamery right next door, and it just feels like things are growing. And if you're ready for a proposal to approve, I'm ready.
Well, I get to say I like the project too.
Oh,
I think it's a fantastic project. Thank you so much for bringing it to us. I hope that navigating the sort of non-housing elements of the Gateway Plan was not too challenging. This is the first project we've ever done through this, and so if you have feedback for us in the city, that would be appreciated. I just hope we can build a lot of housing so that the employees can live right by and bike to work someday, and it'll be great. Do we have? Oh yeah.
Can I just add to the motion before it's made?
Yes. Yes.
Make sure that we hit on a couple of key points. The condition of approval B10 states, currently no wood-burning appliances shall be installed, operated, or maintained on the project site at any time during the life of the project, et cetera, et cetera. So your motion should include striking B10 and then also modifying the statements that are made in the findings that support that that condition of approval. And then also this is B2, this is on packet page 28 of 156. There's a condition of approval around the public access easement, and it's worded just slightly awkwardly to potentially add confusion. And so right now it reads, the applicant shall record a public access easement for public accessibility onto the parcel from back of curb to the property line. And what I'm recommending you do is strike that back of curb to the, and then adding after property line to approximately 6 feet. And then at the end, adding to the specification of the city engineer. So this gets back to the discussion that we had, that we don't know exactly what the lines are going to line up like for the actual design. So the condition B2 will read, public access easement. The applicant shall record a public access easement for public accessibility onto the parcel from the property line to approximately 6 feet on 8th and 9th Streets, and 2 feet on N Street to the city of Arcata, to the specifications of the city engineer. The easement shall be recorded prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy. So essentially, we're adding those easements internal to the property lines to the maximum of 6 feet.
so may I make a motion that includes staff presentation on the modifications
Yes.
to the conditions of approval as just described? And furthermore, that I'd like to move that we approve the Gateway Use Permit and Gateway Design Review Permit for Yurok Natural Resources Center interior and exterior renovations and site improvements at 820 N Street. Do you need more? CEQA exemption?
That's in the action.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Congratulations. And thank you for the, yeah. Okay, next on our agenda is our business item, which is to consider recommendations for amendments to the land use code consistent with General Plan 2045. Can we please begin with a staff report?
Yeah, good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Tonight we're picking up the sort of second part of the show that we started at our last meeting. Let me let our consultant in. At your May 12th meeting, we did a presentation to orient you to the material. We started talking about recommendations from the Planning Commission for changes in the land use code that are to be consistent with the general plan we adopted in 2024. This is a continuation of that conversation, and the intent here is that we go through the comments that you all made Thank you for sending those in to us. And then any additional items that we can get through that we added in list form in this staff report in anticipation of the City Council Planning Commission study session that you'll have on June 8th. The idea here is that we start to flesh out these concepts and in particular the policy underpinnings before your conversation with the City Council so that they're primed and ready to have the conversation on June 8th. So without further ado, we presented a lot of material last time. I want to leave most of this time for Planning Commission. We did send out the framework. We included that in the staff report. If we need to use that framework, we can. If we wind up getting stuck in our conversations, I saw a lot of alignment. I was talking with the chair earlier, and he was suggesting that he saw a lot of alignment as well, and that we may not need the framework, but it's there for us if we need it. Are there any questions about how the framework would work, or what we're doing here tonight, or just generally about the materials?
Briefly, if we all fully agree on anything that's been presented or that we've previously touched on, is that material specifically or that agreement specifically going to move on to the June 8th discussion?
Yeah, I look at this as like all of the material is going to move on to June 8th. And really these conversations are conversations to prime the City Council. They may pick up on these themes that we've been talking about. They may pick up on other themes that are, of interest to them. But we will definitely move all of this information. They're going to see everything that you've seen and including everything that you've written.
Are we going to summarize the things that we all agreed should be discussed or changed? So that we have a laundry list, so, the City Council would kind of have it condensed for them of what we've talked about and decided?
We can certainly do that in preparation for the June 8th meeting. I think a lot of this is going to be, based on the conversations that we're having. The City Council members are watching these meetings as well, and so they're hearing your deliberations. And what my hope is that through these preliminary conversations, we can take, these tens of pages, hundreds of recommendations, and really hone in on the areas that, you all think are of interest. So we can certainly summarize those areas where you had agreement. What I think that's going to largely look like is the papers that you sent me, the writings that you sent in anticipation of these, just collating them and saying, here you go, City Council, this is what the Planning Commission said. So we'll kind of see what we do with it after we've had the conversation, I think, like what's the best way to package that for the City Council.
Okay, so with that, I was thinking we could start with Commissioner Ham's comments. So if you want to kind of run through your main asks of us, and then we can have a discussion on them.
Yeah, thanks. I guess I'm very curious to hear, assuming you guys have taken some time to read and digest these. I'm very curious to hear if there are kind of comments or pushback, especially from the consultant team and staff. And so, yeah, I don't really want to go into point by point here, but just in general, like an intention to increase density. And I think the project that we just reviewed is like a really interesting example, right? Where there was like public benefit, right? And those required or like allowed for some exemptions. And I guess I just kind of think about it as like, how do we incentivize housing development actually, if we are kind of allowing existing buildings and they're providing all this public benefit, but like how can we like actually incentivize adding housing to the projects that come through. And so, yeah, we talked a little bit about the zero lot line development and then this density minimum and, multifamily, so allowing up to 4 units or more. I guess maybe just, should I pause after each of these for discussion?
It seems like we need to chew on these a little bit
Okay,
as
please.
a group.
Yes.
Yeah, so maybe I'll I'll start at the top. Zero lot line development was one that we briefly talked about. I have, since 2 weeks ago, done some research and thinking about this, and I am very open to this idea. I am more excited about it than I was when we first talked about it. I don't know if you all have thought about zero lot line development.
Point of clarification, is it the front setbacks stay the same and the sides, but it's the back of the property? Is that correct? Is that what your recommendation is?
I would be open to all. I mean, I understand that there's a front, street face that the city might want to have some more regulations on, but like specifically side and rear,
Eliminate
zero.
or reduce down to zero on side
any
and rear?
setbacks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even the rear?
Yes.
Side to side seems fine, and yeah. But the rear, I'm not sure.
Can we add a little to the conversation
Yes,
too?
please do.
And I'll invite Monica on our consulting team with Lisa Weiss Consulting to jump in as well as my colleague Dilo. One of the things that we've been talking about in terms of the zero lot line, we have some areas of town already, like our commercial central, where there's a zero front lot line. You can build right up to the sidewalk. It does get a little complicated with easements on adjoining neighbors if you have side and rear. If I can't get my neighbor to give me an easement, then repairing my wall becomes a little bit more challenging. And I don't know, Monica or Dilo, do you have additional thoughts about zero lot line?
Not just more challenging, but potentially litigious.
Yeah, I mean, you can maintain your wall from the inside of your building at that point, which, is difficult but not impossible.
I will say that Monica did weigh in on this one, and it sounds like there would be ways to achieve this. It didn't raise any red flags for their team. And I think that the examples that Commissioner Ham gives of row houses and townhomes are excellent examples where this could make sense. I also think there could be instances where this could pose issues. So I would recommend we think through this carefully, all the different ways that this could play out. I will also say that in my, Planning 101 class, I was introduced to this concept of planning as being tied to public health and safety and overcrowding and lack of sunlight, and this interesting thing called rickets, which is a disease from lack of sunlight, was brought up. And so there could be implications for this, but there also are plenty of projects where this makes perfect sense. So I would definitely be interested in discussing this more and thinking about where it would make sense and where it may not. And it sounds like Commissioner Chair Simmons has thought about this as well. So be curious to know what your research resulted in.
Well, I was it's funny. I was thinking about places where the front already exists, and I was thinking about places where I would like to see that kind of development in the future. And then also the example of like the row houses and like what kinds of projects are never even being proposed to us because our code doesn't permit them. And so, yeah, it's interesting to think about what we're trying to encourage with these.
Row houses certainly come to fore, the eastern row houses. But they had space in front and the back. They had no space on sides. So that's why I made the comment I did.
Yeah, I so get it on row houses. I super wonder if it just started randomly happening around town and somebody built to the property line, then suddenly the neighbor is looking at whatever color that new wall is or whatever texture or anything. And, do they get to paint it? Like, I really don't want it pink right in my yard or something like that. I mean, just weird stuff comes up, and maintenance. Or if it never gets painted and the owner of the building never goes there because it's in somebody else's yard, then what? And I do know of people in town in the neighborhood I used to be in where there are buildings right on the property line and the neighbors are friends and they agree on a paint color and it all works out. But we have to plan for things to be a little more complicated. And so I'm just stuck on those kinds of, almost silly challenges. So on the kind of the gradients of, what do you call that? Yeah, I'm kind of in the 4 thing, where I just need more information. I'm not ready to support it. I'm not against it. The row house thing as an exemption, where the whole block was intended to be built in this certain way and they all just sister up. I think that's a great way to modify lot lines, very intentionally and by design.
And we do have a couple of projects like that. There's Courtyards that has townhomes. The lots are narrow. The buildings are built right up to the lots, and they share common walls. The Marsh Commons project has common wall. So we certainly have, provisions that allow for that. And I think, if you had a caveat that, the 0 lot line would be on a parcel that you own, that simplifies it. But I do think it's worth exploring. I mean, I get where you're going, like trying to maximize the build. Or buildability, and don't prevent creative ideas for how to create housing.
Yeah, I think it's really specific. I mean, I think that I have like some conflicting opinions about like the design capacity of this community, but I think the intention would just be to allow for creative density solutions that are prohibited by setbacks. And so I don't think I'm proposing we live in a world where we're built out to every single lot line and like we have no open space. Like that's, but I also don't want to limit future development, and I want to trust our design professionals to be able to come up with elegant solutions and not be prohibited by these fairly large setbacks. And I think the social concern of the emotional relationship with the neighbor, to me, like, can be handled. I think that our design professionals will be able to navigate building code to allow for, what makes sense in terms of maintenance and also like constructability on a lot line. And so again, I think it's of deep interest to me to see what is possible within that framework. But I also understand there's some concerns there.
So Chair, is this an example of one where if we're not totally in agreement, how do we include this in the discussion with council on the 8th?
Well, it sounded like staff was interested in maybe doing some of their own looking into this and then bringing back something more formal to be considered. Is that, and I think we're all at least in agreement that that would be of interest to us.
This is great. This is a little bit of building the plane while we're flying it. Like, how do we get this discussion to the council, right? Like, we don't have a clear, like, everyone is in agreement on this. And I think a lot of it is going to be the council members are going to watch this meeting and they're going to start thinking about the ideas that you're bringing up. I believe that, submitting this memo that Commissioner Ham provided to us and just having them have that available to them so they can start to think about it. We've all named a couple of instances where we think this would be a great solution to, increasing housing. And there are some, notable exceptions. We certainly don't want rickets. So I think, this is a good segue, I think, maybe to the next topic about density minimum. So we'll forward this on to the council as like, hey, we think we ought to explore this as a way to increase density. In terms of the density minimums, I think the memo was actually just identifying that we just adopted in the general plan no maximums and minimums. So that's certainly something that we've proposed to do and would certainly include in these updates. Many of the updates that are being proposed in the memo are simply just making the land use code consistent with the policy that we just adopted in the general plan. So staff certainly supports the density minimums paragraph that you have here.
Well, and I think the project we just saw is like an example of, but I think it's okay for projects that don't quite meet the density minimum to ask us for permission, right? Like it feels a little bit too constrictive to say, like, you can't even ask, right? Like,
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the project we just approved is a really lovely project. I think I just want to understand a way that that's just not all, like, if we continue to do that, then we will build no housing. And so I just like personally don't understand how to like incentivize housing being added to projects. Especially, I mean, yeah. Okay, I'll stop that.
It was awkward to do it while they were here, but I almost wanted to, like, did anyone, hey, if you put some housing on top of this, you actually don't have to have this meeting. But yeah.
We definitely had that conversation with them. Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think that, this kind of segues into the conversation around our current policy for the commercial mixed use areas where if, if you don't want to provide the housing and you want to do a strict commercial project, you have to get a use permit in order to do that. That gives the city some discretion, actually a fair amount of discretion, because we have little discretion when it comes to a housing project that's, protected by Housing Accountability Act. There are no acts out there protecting commercial projects. So it really would be to the discretion of the commission, ultimately the city council, if we have that policy in place and someone comes before you and they're like, look, I want another exception. And you think to yourself, well, we've just had 5 others that asked for an exception. We're really trying to, make this area more vibrant. The way we can make this area more vibrant is if there's more housing. We're gonna deny this, certainly within your purview, under the auspices of a use permit. In those situations, especially if it's embedded in the land use code, it's a specific standard. This is an area where, some staff have been concerned, like, why are we making it harder for a project that wants to propose jobs in our area? And I agree with that as well. I think it's, a policy question that we should wrestle with. What I've observed in my career is that it's more often than not the other way around. Someone comes in and they want to propose a housing project and we have to tell them no because it's zoned for commercial. We've really reversed because of this history, because of my history with this city, because of hearing from, the developers, the landowners, the project proponents for years. I would build housing here, but I can't because you require commercial on the ground floor. Look across the street, it's vacant commercial. I'm not building more commercial for you, therefore you're not getting housing. That's why we wrote the policies the way we wrote them. We heard that consistently. So I think it's a low risk generally. You're definitely going to have projects like, our Yurok Natural Resources project where it's just completely incompatible for them to have housing, a medical facility. You're just not going to get housing. On top of that, certain kinds of other use types, you're probably just not going to get that mix. But for the most part, people are realizing, especially in this economy, that housing is the hedge against the fluctuations in the market commercially. We've seen, unfortunately, a lot of, retail go towards online shopping. And so, people are really wanting to provide the housing where they can. So I feel like there's very low risk if you allow an escape valve for a use permit for a project that proposes no housing.
Okay. I feel like we got a good, yeah. Next one on here is multifamily by right in all residential zones. Yeah. Do you want to make like a pitch?
Just to allow, again, more density in residential zones. So essentially eliminating single family zoning, which many other municipalities have done, building up to 4 units. SB 9 does this, but it is challenging. And I think if Arcata itself adopts something more explicitly like this, it would allow a different pathway for that. And so, we do have some properties with large lots that could allow for additional dwelling units. And so, yeah, I think, again, this could, especially in tandem with zero lot line or zero setbacks, like could allow real density. And I think, I think it could open the market for non-developer developers. You know, it could allow, instead of building like a 40 unit complex, you're allowed to kind of add density to single family lots, which is, you know, allowed by state law, but again, not super utilized yet.
It would sort of be us codifying SB9 and saying like we in Arcata agree with this sort of direction for single family neighborhoods.
Yeah. My experience with SB9 is that, yeah, it seems like everybody's handling it a bit differently, and some people can with or without a lot split, it just seems a bit inconsistent. And so, yeah, I think that this would clarify and just promote that kind of density building.
Do we have comments from commissioners or staff?
Presently, they 3 units, right, per parcel.
We're at 4. SB9.
SB9 allows 4. Yeah, 2 is 1 is unattached, and how does that play out?
Yeah, I think it's 2 dwelling units, 1 ADU and 1 JADU, and the JADUs have to be attached, and that's without a lot split.
So presently, we can do up to 4 under SB9, and you're saying to make it just more Arcata specific, that they don't have to be attached or unattached, just 4, however you want to configure.
That would be by right development proposal. Yeah. You wouldn't have to pull in the state.
And sorry, on this 0 lot line thing, would we go up 2 stories right up to the lot line, or do you want to touch on that?
I think that would be great. Yes, I'm open to comments and feedback on that as well.
Maybe a step back above 3 or 4 stories. I'm thinking it through. But yeah, that's going to be in our conversation about how to implement, how we Arcata could implement 0 lot lines. But I think, Dilo, did you have something on SB9 or?
Yeah. If there's generally support from the commission for exploring this additional density, there are some ways we could get creative. The land use elements that the commission adopted does set densities already, right? So that piece of the policy is done. But currently in our land use code, the standard is 7.25 dwelling units per acre. So there is a little bit of flexibility in the interpretation. If you have an acre lot, you get 7 units. Currently, under certain circumstances, the answer is yes. We could modify our standards to make it easier to achieve that. Right now, a duplex is allowed in a low density zone by right, and a single family home, and then you can add ADUs to that. If you choose to go our alternative development option, development route, you can get more units, but they need to be allocated for low income households. If we wanted to modify that, we could open it up to anybody. So that's just an example of a way we could potentially flex within our current density standards to allow more density on each lot.
I would add to that, right now, the way we implement the ADU law is we allow for a duplex. And if you have a duplex, that's a multifamily unit, and therefore you could add 2 additional units. That's basically what state law says. So we allow 4 units on a single family parcel now. If we made that by right 4 units that you could do multifamily, then you'd be able to build up to 6 units on a lot with the 2 ADUs that are allowed from state law. The other thing I wanted to just mention, as the conversation circled back around to 0 lot lines and building height and that sort of thing, in a way, all of these categories that we're putting together are very arbitrary. If you think of a multifamily building that's condoed, you have 0 lot lines both up and down and side to side, and everybody has common walls. And so it's I think it leads me back to the idea that what is most important is the design standards. And if we can come up with design standards, the objective design standards that create the Arcata that we want to live in, the built environment we want to live in, then the arbitrary ways we divide that, and the ownership of that that real estate is moot. It ultimately works for us because that's how we want our built environment. And to the chair's point, thing that got me thinking about that was this idea of like, well, maybe we have setbacks, and et cetera. So I think having that conversation, a little bit more around what design would work for us could probably resolve those questions.
So I think the direction is we're interested in these strategies for allowing more density in all residential neighborhoods. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I think I care less about how many dwelling units are within the built environment next door, like, can I garden in the future, or, whatever, all those things, privacy issues and stuff that we all kind of bought into or got used to over the years, chose that lot because of, and it could change dramatically. And I think we all need to percolate on that quite a bit. So, and I think it's a perfectly good phrase though, the built environment. What's the minimum built environment that we're comfortable with? And then what happens inside, like the gateway, what happens inside, I don't care,
Is that, are you satisfied with that conversation? Yeah. Okay. Parking.
Parking, yeah. I don't know if you all had any comments, but parking maximums and then unbundled parking for larger residential projects. Sweet. Love it.
Thumbs way up. That's the direction, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like we need to spend too much time. I think we all kind of feel that way. And I'm just, yes.
One quick just question for the commission is just to clarify, this would be for residential, commercial, all use types, no parking minimum. So for a hotel, for example, no parking minimum or any other use.
I think the thumbs way up was just on the unbundling on larger projects. The rest of it feels like there's more discussion. I mean, it's been introduced heavily over a number of meetings, and we're all kind of okay with some of it or not quite sure.
I think some of it's already in the code. I think the question is, do we continue to have what we just adopted in the code? Right? Like, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's in the general plan policy, and the idea was, to eliminate parking minimums, to allow the private market to decide how much parking to provide, to a maximum. And I think those maximums we may want to revisit. And then we also talked a lot when we were developing this policy about unbundling the parking to make it so that, in some ways, on the one hand, you're commodifying the parking, you're requiring people to pay for it. That's, above and beyond their rent. And then people start to understand the true value of that parking. It becomes less of a, sense that there's a right to it. So I think all of those ideas, everything that I see written under number 2 here, I feel like is consistent with the policy that we just adopted. And I think to your point, Chair, some of this exercise is, are we sure we want to do this? And I think staff would recommend, yeah, let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it creates a lot of really great opportunity for alternative modes of transit, sponsored by the city, sponsored by the state, sponsored by private company. Like, I think that that's a huge priority I hear in this community. And I think if these are codified, like, let's just see it happen.
Yeah, and just to, for information, we essentially eliminated parking requirements on housing projects, and I have not talked to, and that was, in 2024, I've not talked to a single person who's building a housing project that's willing to take us up on that. They all say, I have to have parking. So parking's not going out of style just because we adopted this policy, but we can tweak it a little bit and make sure that there's not over parking. Situations like we have at, the Uniontown Shopping Center.
Or the mall, the Bayshore Mall.
And I do think they appreciate the options, they appreciate the flexibility, so.
Okay. I think moving to point number 3, the design standards, I, agree with Chair Simmons a lot about the articulation requirements or removing those. And I guess to kind of summarize, I worry about certain design criteria just becoming like a checklist for designers. And then you get boxitecture, you get Lego buildings, you get really unpleasant spaces. And so, I think that and it's like what we're seeing. I mean, I think that this is just what we see with multifamily housing happening across the country. And it's really disappointing. And so I just don't want that to be like, I don't want us like in the adoption or how we like go through complying with SB 330 to just generate that kind of a project. And so again, I kind of look to our consultants and staff for their own background and expertise and comments on this. But, I think that like if we had some alternatives to those, so replacing this articulation with what's called like what I'm calling public realm performance standards. So like what it's doing to the public space, and creating like a list of ideas that could be benefit there. So I wonder your thoughts on any of those.
They would still be heading towards objective standards, of course, right? So somehow it'd have to be described and written, and we'd all have to look at that and see what it looks like or what that means, because this is new stuff.
Yeah, it can't be vague. Yeah.
So I think the way we hoped it would work is there's like a menu of options, and it's like choose, 2 of these 6 items, and the hope was that would create enough diversity. Do you think maybe we should relook at those and try to add more options, or I'm just trying to, with the objective quality to this that is sort of, I understand what the state is trying to do, but I also know how it limits us a little bit. How do we do that?
Yeah, I think I look to staff and our consultants for some ideas here. I think that it could be quite a cumbersome process to come up with a list, and I don't really have a proposal in this exact moment, but I think, they would have to be objective. And, I'm thinking a lot about our community benefits program and how some of those were just like, we just like picked them out of the air over a long period of time with lots of intention. But I also think that there, some were missed because they just weren't in the room, and I think this could end up in a similar place. And so I would want to avoid something like that and really, so I think I'm like really seeking some expertise and ideas over there.
I'll ask Monica to address this as well, from Lisa Weiss Consulting. I think you are exactly right. This is really hard to get right. And I think, Chair, to your point, in your presentation, the Jacoby Storehouse doesn't have any of that articulation. It's a beautiful building. The project that we approved tonight wouldn't have met those articulation requirements, but it's a fantastic building. And so clearly we kind of got it wrong, and we need to fix that. And I'm not sure exactly how to do that, but I think we can workshop it a little bit. And I think we're kind of on the right track. We know what we need. We know what the end condition is that we want to get. We just need to think of a way to describe that in ways that make them objective design standards.
It's really hard to get good design if you have a checklist, and it's, but if you're trying to be objective, how do you get away from a checklist?
I think if your checklist is about like use or benefits to like the streetscape, like the public sphere, rather than, I think this like facade articulation pattern that we've seen is just like, I don't know where that came out of, and I've seen really great projects that don't have any articulation. And I think it's like corners are expensive to build. Like, I think that it's a challenge, and I just want us to try to figure out a way to move away from that.
where are we at with this project was objectively designed by an architect and therefore it's objectively
I think Monica's jumped on. I can see she's turned on her camera. So maybe Monica, do you want to help us out here?
I do. Thank you, David, and I'm sorry for leaving as a panelist, and thank you for adding me back into a panelist. So I'm Monica Siblick from Lisa Wise Consulting, and was happy to speak to you 2 weeks ago, and happy to be back. And I'm glad that we're diving into some of these topics. Objective design standards and we've given a lot of thought to this for the past 5 years since SB 330, right? So a lot of cities around the state, have tried different ways to address, to develop and work into the regulatory framework, their code or other documents, design standards, and how do they work with the basic development standards? Are they two different things? Do they work together? And we found that there's no shortcut, right? We can look at other cities and see how they do it, but we'll notice that it just doesn't work for your city, for the city we're focusing on. So we kind of do it the long way. I mean, we look at existing buildings. What are the buildings at the city that are buildings that are widely appreciated by the community? And then we try to drill down into what is it about them that works. And this just varies from community to community. We look at design review. What are some records of design review that tells us what have you all discussed and what comes up and what are your priorities? Of course, reach out to the community, hear about their priorities. We'll draw on the discussion that you all have already had during the gateway process, and lend our own input in terms of our knowledge about best practices and what we've seen in other communities. And the feedback we've gotten over the past 4 years or so from communities that have implemented design standards that we've worked on is really valuable. So, and then also, of course, we have to take into consideration costs, and we are sensitive to that. And sometimes there will be a standard that is demanding of something expensive, and that's just something that the community is going to intentionally require anyway because it's important. So it's sort of all of the above. And I can also tell you we tend to stay away from point systems that don't really work. Sometimes we will say, okay, two out of the following 6, and then we'll try to make sure that the cost and the impact of each is commensurate. We have also worked with communities that have historic architecture, and a lot of times there's different feelings about, well, we want to replicate that, and generally we don't advise, although some community members would prefer to see historic styles and elements replicated. We generally fall into the camp of these are buildings that are built today, and we wanted to do the best of what we see that is being built today, while acknowledging established patterns in terms of form, module, height, and just working through standards that way. I'll also mention, and I know we were talking about the Gateway area, and then we're going to be looking at the Valley West area and developing a form-based code. So form-based codes are they're the objective design standards that have been around for a long time, because that's sort of the approach. So we'll also be thinking about what are the design standards. We'll be thinking more specifically about specific locations, not just by zone, in the Valley West, and thinking a little bit about the zero lot line discussion earlier. We'll want to do it very sensitively. So that's something that we would be inclined to say, okay, there's an advantage to having a continuous street wall because it makes for a walkable district, but it doesn't necessarily need to apply to an entire zone. Maybe it's in specific areas where we intentionally want to create a certain feeling. And that can be true in a form-based area. it can also be true in just parts of the CM or the CC elsewhere in the city. There are ways to build that into a code. So that's a very long answer to say that there's just a whole lot you got to think about when we develop design standards. But as we work through it, hearing your priorities and your concerns are going to drive the work more than anything.
I think to the question too about what about the standard that it was designed by an architect? I think that would have worked, 10, 15 years ago. I feel like now that wouldn't quite qualify as an objective design standard. We had a planning commissioner who famously pointed out that, some architects design really poorly and so on and so forth. I think that, this is an evolving conversation. We took, the Gateway was really our first crack at it, at objective design standards, and we've already learned a few things. So maybe dialing back on some of the features that we thought were going to be important to add that visual interest. And starting to focus a little bit more on, what's most important. We had one of our architects during that time frame tell us, well, if you do these step backs, you're going to create more expensive buildings. People aren't going to build them. That may be true. And I think we made an intentional decision to add step backs to larger buildings to address the community concerns about, shading and bulk and mass. That's just one example of many where, I think if we think through, specific design challenges that we want to make sure that we don't replicate, we can avoid those through these design standards, and then maybe free it up a little bit and say, look, we're not going to be as prescriptive, and we're going to trust the design professionals to design good buildings. And then we're going to accept that not everyone is going to agree when a good building has been designed. But there's a lot of subjectivity in it.
Any other comments or thoughts?
This is the problem of our time. I think it's a real challenge. And I appreciate the comments, Monica. Thank you for those. Yeah, I think you also touched on kind of this, these comments of like nodding to our historical past. And while I think it does create a really interesting and unique fabric, I would be hesitant to propose that our buildings need to like replicate any sort of Victorian proportions. I think we're building with materials and technologies of today, and I just don't. I think restricting us to kind of a past style is just not appropriate.
Agree.
Okay, so with this one being like, who knows? This is a big like thing to chew on. Maybe we can just like, I don't know how to kind of digest this enough to move on, because I do realize time is passing.
I think we're pretty much in agreement with what you've written here, unless anyone has any. And so we'll just forward that on to the city council
If
and
at
LWC.
some point in the future we have an opportunity at one of these meetings to look at images, that would be helpful. What's a bad building, or a 4-story bad building, or the worst, or I don't know,
Maybe even a field trip
maybe even a
would
field
be
trip.
nice.
Yeah.
Just throwing it out there.
How far do we have to drive
do
to
like
see a
field
bad
trips.
building?
I wanted to say too that, some of the things that Commissioner Ham listed as examples to make it more about relationship to the street are things that the Gateway Code does attempt to do, talking about minimum transparency, no blank walls longer than a defined length. These are concepts that we have attempted to address. So, maybe it's not start over from scratch, but figure out what's working and what maybe could be improved, and trying to make it a bit more dynamic and less prescriptive is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Because again, back to the UROC project that we just looked at, it didn't meet the glazing requirements, and it didn't meet the point of entry requirements, and it wasn't going to. It wouldn't be designed for its particular use if it did what we wanted it to do. It wouldn't have had the same architectural feel if it had that much glazing. So it's a tricky one, but that's the last I'll say.
just a comment about that UROC building. You know, when I opened the agenda and saw the building, my impression was, wow, that's a cool building. Good for them. And then there's this list of ways that it's out of compliance. You know, I was thinking, holy mackerel, we have this code, and here's the building that obviously we want, and we have to do all these exceptions.
But good on us that we did.
Yeah, well, and therein lies the rub, because you can either say, look, we cannot envision all the cool buildings that we're going to crush if we come up with a set of standards. And therefore, we should have no standards and we should let any building be built. I mean, that's, you know, kind of like the extreme other alternative somewhere in there. I mean, I like Delo's suggestion that we have some flexibility and dynamism and not just go all the way to the hard left, but really that's, you know, we can't envision all of those buildings, which is why we gave a use permit requirement. And then we see this building and it's like, well, it's a shame that we required this to go through a special process because we love it, you know?
Great. Thanks for all of your comments and support.
Well, and well-designed buildings can easily get through our difficult process is my hope.
Moving on. Yeah, so number 4, historic review. I think this, I just, you know, I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but just make it easier to get projects through these processes. So yeah, like what would require discretionary review, narrowing that, reducing the barriers there. Some like additional categorical exemptions. I am kind of curious about the Historic Landmarks Committee. I don't know a lot about them and like, do they have time limits on their review?
I could speak to that if you would like. So our Historic Landmarks Committee, I just want to do a plug for our committee because they are fantastic and very qualified for what they do. I have served as the liaison for that committee since I started 7 years ago. And I've never seen them continue an item or deny a project. They generally are very supportive of flexibility and adaptive reuse. And generally, I would say, you know, if there is a delay, it's less with the committee and just more with our existing process. And challenges with making modifications to items that have been listed as features to be preserved associated with that resource. We've had a couple of projects come forward recently, the Whaley House that you mentioned, and then the Rossi project on the plaza as well. Both included features listed to be preserved that the committee was fully in support of being flexible on, and those are brought to you. But again, you know, we had to kind of thread a needle there procedurally because of the CEQA implications. But that is because of the way we have structured our preservation strategy and really not the fault of the committee. I would say one thing that we've been discussing is ways to maybe not create these landmark overlay zones for each resource, so that way we're not having to go through map amendments or, you know, bring these items to the commission or the committee every time, build in that flexibility. But it is, again, also tricky to guide modifications to resources that the city has indicated they want to preserve. And we have a long history of that. So trying to balance those two things is difficult. But we have been discussing ways to make that process more straightforward for applicants while still being, you know, well within the bounds of CEQA for local landmarks. And the plan development overlay, we're looking at trying to find ways to modify that process as well, because it does create this kind of crazy, this crazy process for applicants.
I appreciate that. background. I guess I'm kind of wondering, is there a way that if a project meets the policy goals, like adding housing, for example, like, do we have to deliberate, us or the Historic Landmarks Committee, all of these people involved, like, about removing bars on windows that may or may not be a historic feature? Like, is there a way to, like, prioritize how these things are processed so that it doesn't actually go through this, like, lengthy process if it still meets our, like, larger priorities as a city?
Yeah, unfortunately, there are a couple of resource types or processes that, that we get stuck in a CEQA loop on, I guess is how I would describe them. Historic resources are one of the areas where there's actually an exception to the exemptions for CEQA, right? So if you're going to have a negative impact on a historic resource, you have to do an EIR. You cannot take an exception for it. And so our Historic Landmarks Committee has actually been very helpful in moving projects forward that would otherwise require an EIR, because they help us understand how the project meets the Secretary of Interior standards, and then we can qualify for, Class 32 exemption, even if it's modifying something that someone back in the 80s said, hey, this is a feature to be preserved. Typically, traditionally, the most straightforward approach to addressing someone who wants to modify a feature to be preserved is to tell them, well, you can't, or you have to do an EIR. And so you're talking about a really lengthy process. Our Historic Landmarks Committee it's comprised of working professionals, each of whom has way more knowledge and understanding than anyone on staff, arguably anyone in the city, and is an invaluable resource to us in these situations. We could not have just said, look, the Whaley House is doing a good project overall. It's going to benefit the historic resource anyway. Let's just let them do it. We had to go through those procedural steps to verify that we're, not impacting a historic resource. And that process built the legitimacy to support the staff recommendation. When it comes to the other procedural details, like how you actually affect that, when we set up our historic resources preservation program back in the the 70s and carried forward into our last general plan, we were creative. We created these zone districts, special overlay zone districts for historic resources that allowed them to do many things that other properties couldn't do, a lot of the adaptive reuse and that sort of thing. What we really didn't anticipate is that, that's great once you do it the first time. We kind of had a, come one, come all approach. If you want to be a historic landmark, we're going to waive all the fees. We got, most of our historic landmarks within a couple of years around the late 80s to early 90s. But then to modify those, it's the same as doing any kind of land use code amendment. It's $10,000 deposit right off the get-go. It's impossible. And so we've consistently worked to try and find, ways to work around that. And what Dilo's alluding to is what we're going to be proposing is sort of downgrading those ordinances to more like resolutions, things that can be done a lot more quickly. Thinking of different ways, both with historic landmarks and plan developments, to simplify the review so that there's still some kind of discretionary consideration. It's not that they're just happening over the counter at planning or something like that, but that there is a public process and discretionary review, but to really simplify what that looks like. We're hoping to be able to find a way to systematically do that through this update process, where basically all the ordinances get downgraded somehow to a resolution. Don't have all the details worked out, but we are thinking a lot about this. Had the same experience that you did. Ultimately, this is a no-brainer project. We want to make sure that it happens, but it's impossibly expensive and complex to get people through that process. So why would they do it? Yeah.
And one thing that we also want to be, sensitive to is that some of these processes can be sort of a disincentive for folks to want to landmark their houses too, if it doesn't allow them that flexibility to make the modifications that they want. And, we could try and drill into some specific ways to avoid that. And the Whaley House was interesting because what they wanted to do was a lot split, and SB 9 explicitly prohibited that. But if we created our own local ordinance that permitted it, it wouldn't have been an issue, right? Under certain circumstances. Or if we had made a smaller lot size, we could have made it so it wasn't an issue. So there are different ways to, approach the problem to avoid some of these issues that folks are running into.
I just want to point out, you said the historic committee right now is excellent and, has done a really good job at helping projects get through. But that depends on the people on the committee, and 10 years from now, it's probably going to be different people. So to the extent, I agree with what you said. To the extent that we can codify that so it's easier for historic properties, that would be better than relying on people who may not be here.
The point well taken.
Yeah, I would just reiterate too, Peter, that two things. One, this is way outside of our hands. This is, a requirement of CEQA. And so we have to go through that process to build that legitimacy. I knew it from the start, Dilo knew it from the start. If we just said, hey, we're going to, shoot this thing up to the planning commission, we're going to fast track this thing, we're not going to get expert input here, we could have been questioned and we would have lost. We would have lost that question. What we did on CEQA grounds, what we did was we navigated the process in a way that created a lot of support for approving the project. So that's point one. Point two is that you're all appointed, they're all appointed. The vibe that we have is reflective of where the council's political mindset is. And so if we were in a different political mindset, if the politics were like, hey, we got to lock this stuff down, we can't let anything happen, none of you would be on this commission. None of them would be on that committee, because they're actively working to get reasonable stuff done, reflecting what, our council, our understanding of what the council wants to see. So those things, I'm not worried about what's going to happen 10 years in the future. If 10 years in the future, we're a totally different community that doesn't want to see housing built, then, we'll all be replaced by people who don't want to see housing built. So, we're kind of future-proof based on, the fact that, it's representative, I guess. Democracy is happening right here, right now.
Just one more thing while we're on this topic. I think in the general plan, we did a list of historic resources. And part of the idea was like, this is the list until we specifically add new resources. Is that sort of still the direction from the city?
Well, just to clarify, so in the Gateway area, we said if you have chosen to be listed or not, these are the resources we've identified. But in the historic preservation element, the only list in there is our current landmarks, which is a voluntary listing. So it's not representative of all resources in the city, just to clarify.
But yes, the intent is to have all historic resources mapped so that whether they're listed or not, people know in advance that they have a historic landmark or a historic resource.
Harder than you would think, but
it's harder than you would think.
We're attempting.
But Dila's made a lot of good progress. We just haven't adopted it yet. And I think we've got, Dila's the master on this one. She's come up with a strategy that we will be able to get there.
Looking forward to it. Okay, so I think that covers historic review.
Totally. And my last 2 points, I think, are not like really, we don't need to belabor them, streamline permitting. I think it's on the way, like from what we saw from the presentation from Lisa Weiss last time. It just feels like even just the code being laid out in a different format, I think things are on the move in an upward direction. And I think it's my general, preference for more ministerial approvals of everything. I'm also just going to talk about the next point, Valley West, because I know we're going to be in the future talking a lot about that. I don't have a lot. My point is that I don't have a lot to say, and we'll be talking about it in the future. And that's all for now.
Thank you very much.
Do we have two thumbs? It feels like, sorry, the topic that percolates through all discussions, and I love it. It's
Great. So it is 7:36, I think. Peter has given us one and a little bit of notes. I'm hopeful that we can get through this before 8. And then the only other commissioner who sent in notes was Vice Chair Strickland, who's not present. Maybe what would be the best way to handle that, do you think?
I think, we supply the council with all the materials that commissioners wrote. If you want to write something between now and June 8th, we'll send those as well. I agree. Let's try and get through Peter's.
Yeah, let's do
comments.
Peter's. All right, Peter, would you like to go through each of yours?
Sure. And I will try to be brief. So I think there's general agreement about neighborhood conservation areas because Matt, you made a comment about that, and I think Ashton made a comment about that too. We are trying to have objective standards, and I've quoted here from the city's website, which was the rationale for neighborhood conservation areas. And it is to assure that new construction, modification, or alteration of noteworthy structures and significant changes to other structures are harmonious with the existing character of the neighborhood. And that's a very vague requirement. And as I think Matt has pointed out in the past, that kind of vague statement is often used to delay or prohibit housing, especially multifamily housing. So I would say that we eliminate them. I do think that the Plaza District is kind of unique and small, and I would be in favor of keeping that, but otherwise I think we should just eliminate conservation areas.
I totally agree. By definition, they require a whole nother layer of cost and analysis. And that statement you read is the most subjective thing that's come across our plate in a long time. I mean, that's just, we're beyond this. I'm surprised we still have them, and I'm thrilled that we're discussing this. And
I think you all already know that I'm in favor of getting rid of them, and I'm seeing a nod from Ashton. So that's 4 out of 4 for this.
How do you feel about the Plaza District?
I guess I just feel if they're written in a way that doesn't obstruct the production of housing, and I think that how they're kind of used now is like it makes it cumbersome and allows or just like forces another layer of review and process. So I don't know the idea behind potentially modifying them, but like as long as it's not used to obstruct housing.
Well, and they're inherently just an extra level of review. That's what they, and it's not just for housing. Like we had to review that sign that was like a perfectly fine sign. And so even the plaza, I'm not sure that, unless we're worried about David approving something really ghastly in the plaza, but that's what we're worried about here, right?
Well, and he could always elevate it to the commission if he had concern as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The question is, does David need to ask us for permission for every new sign in the plaza?
I'd be happy with getting rid of all of them.
I would too.
The plaza does have it actually has 2 layers because it's not only a neighborhood conservation area, it kind of has 3 layers. It's got a neighborhood conservation area, it's got a historic district, And then arguably the central commercial has another set of, policy or standards that are associated just directly with it. The neighborhood conservation areas, my understanding is that they were basically enacted to try and put another layer of historic review over these areas. They're laid over our older neighborhoods with higher concentrations of older homes. And I believe the idea was to ensure that there was additional attention spent to these neighborhoods. The only reason that we really wanted to avoid dealing with them in the general plan update, frankly, was because we were already, carrying a lot of weight, and there was enough other things to, difficult things to have, conversations with the community about. So staff doesn't have any particular, feelings one way or the other about neighborhood conservation areas.
Well, I think you now have direction from us. Maybe we can see that at a future meeting.
Okay, onward. Objective design standards. I think we've made a lot of progress. The Gateway area was our first crack at it. Now we're looking at Valley West, and my question is, why aren't we doing this citywide? Why are we doing it piecemeal, neighborhood by neighborhood?
I think the intent is to have a set of objective design standards that apply broadly, but that there's a special opportunity in the Valley West that we're trying to take advantage of by having a form-based code that's tailored for that area. 7-story buildings are allowed in the Gateway Hub. They wouldn't be appropriate everywhere in Arcata. And so, defining areas where there's allowable higher density, and specifically what the design of that higher density might look like, is why we're approaching the Valley West slightly differently. But yeah, the intent really is to come up with objective design standards that we can apply broadly, ultimately.
And there is policy in the general plan to even adopt objective standards for single-family development. So there would still be ways to apply objective design standards citywide. It just might be in these areas, like you said, David, that there would be a need for something that's more specific because of maybe allowances and increased density or intensity that might not be allowed in other areas of the city.
Is that the plan, that after we do Valley West, we look at the whole city? I mean, is there a future beyond Valley West?
Yeah, so for objective design standards citywide, yes, there's a future beyond Valley West, in addition to Valley West. But there's just been years and years of policy for these priority infill areas, right? Based on our last housing element through our general plan. That doesn't mean it'll always be that way. It could change over time, but that's the current thrust, is to focus on those areas first.
I think our next housing element might have to look at some more areas for infill housing, potentially.
Okay, moving along. Community benefits. So I know, I was there. We worked, well, the staff did a great job, and we worked long and hard on the community benefits program. And it always seemed to me, I'm speaking personally now, that no one would ever use them because of the state's density bonus program and the similarity in the number of units. I mean, it was a trifle difference between the community benefits program, which was more difficult and more expensive than the density bonus program. So my question is, do we really need it? And should we scrap it?
What is the cost to having it there if no one ever uses it? Like, we already did all the work, right? So it'd be vestigial maybe, but it wouldn't hurt us, right? It's just a sign of all that effort we put in. But and then, hey, maybe someday someone will use it, right? Maybe the state will change state density bonus law. That's also another thing, right?
I I kind of want to hear from our consultant on that comment. Whether or not, like, yeah, are other municipalities like continuing to develop and maintain their community benefits programs?
We have discussed it. So yeah, I think Monica could probably speak to that.
Sure. Yeah, the nature of community benefits programs and how they work, of course, changes when state law changes. I can tell you that just reading through the community benefits program that's included in the gateway plan and the code, it looks to me like it's really geared toward residential mixed use, and the intent is for it to be used to provide benefits and encourage residential. So I guess the way I would frame it is that it makes sense for residential when the base standards like limit development, so that the city then has something that it can sort of loosen in exchange for benefits, things that benefit the community, right? But our standards aren't like that. So we have no maximum density, we don't have restrictive height limits. So most cities that we've worked with, community benefits programs really apply just to non-residential development, to office buildings, to non-residential, just to make sure that the developers just to provide an incentive for developers to do something on-site, open space, childcare uses. I mean, anything, you know, the list can be whatever. But that tends to work better in concert with the standards that we're complying with because they come from the state, and density bonus. It just tends to work better. That's our thought on reading the community benefits program that you have.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, you know, this was really, you know, my brainchild from about 10 years ago, as a way to trade off the fact that we weren't going to have discretionary review with conditions of approval. A lot has changed over the last 10 years. And so I would say it's time to give up the community benefits. I agree. If they don't get used, and they're vestigial and they don't harm anyone, that's great. We don't know how many people are going to look at our code though and say, oh, I'm not going to pay for those community benefits. I'm just not going to develop there. So I do think that there's some benefit of having a code that is clean, that really does what we want it to do, providing those objective design standards. And this is maybe a good segue into your next point, Peter, about inclusionary zoning.
Sorry. So you are suggesting that we drop the community benefits program?
I think that the community benefits program suffered the sausage making of you know, policy, and is completely far afield from what the original intent was. And I think that it's you know, almost indistinguishable from just saying, you know, we're going to charge 15% more on projects. And so I don't know that we are going to get projects that ultimately do pay for those community benefits. To Peter's point, it would be a lot cheaper to add 3% extremely low or very low housing into your project and say those community benefits are the standards that I'm going to not have because I'm doing a density bonus project. So I don't think that they, in light of all the changes to Housing Accountability Act, Builder's Remedy, et cetera, I just don't think that they have the same effect that they might have had 10 years ago. So I would support eliminating them. I would also support keeping them if people think that they're worth keeping. So I'm not adamant about it, but I just don't think they have the same effect.
Do you think, David, it would discourage development because people would read them and say, we're not going to do this?
It's possible. I mean, that's just a hypothetical. I can't prove it one way or the other. I don't know the people who aren't going to talk to us because they read the code and think that's too expensive, but it really does. I mean, we even had conversations. If you recall the final conversations we had about the community benefits program, they had dwindled down from these really, you know, amazing ideas about things that were actually going to get built in the community to 10% towards this fund, 15% towards that fund. And then I think, Dan, you were the one that suggested, why don't we just make it a you know, one big bucket, 15%, You pay us 15% of whatever your project is, and then we use that for good, community good. Because the program had literally devolved into a pay-for-play, way to get ministerial approval. Now projects don't need to pay to play to get ministerial approval. All they have to do is demonstrate that they meet your objective design standards. And so I don't see why anyone would agree to pay that additional cost when there's an alternative, at the ready in state law. They would do a density bonus project.
Okay. I mean, I already called them vestigial, but I guess we're evolving to no longer have them. So
I mean, it's a policy discussion. Staff doesn't support them in the way that they did originally, and it was my idea. So I'm
no,
letting my baby go.
We're sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, on to inclusionary zoning. You probably have read what I wrote. Inclusionary zoning is, has a lot of political weight behind it. It's a good idea. But, what I wrote is true. In my experience, what's happened in Arcata is that professionals, and I'm thinking of my colleagues at the university, but other professionals in town have not lived in Arcata in the last 2 decades, really. Sitting next to me is one of them, who moved to Eureka. And what we need, we do need low and very low income housing, but we badly need housing that is appropriate for young professionals, young professional families that live in our community so that they stay here. They don't go somewhere else. And I don't have a good answer for that. But I don't think we should fall over trying to provide low and very low income housing and ignore the fact that we need housing for professionals as well.
A discussion for the upcoming housing element, perhaps. Something to consider, because that is something that the, housing element does force us to look at, is housing for different income categories and needs. So
And
definitely
we're
something to consider.
chronically lowest on our,
Above
middle and
moderate.
high. Yeah.
Yes. Challenging to build some of those types as income projects, but not impossible.
And can we get in trouble with
simple.
the state for not providing those categories? It seems like the trouble's always when you don't provide the low-income housing. but
Generally, yeah.
you can for even high-income housing, or
Generally, it's not as much of a concern for the higher income projects. But I think there are implications for SB 35 streamlining if you don't build it above moderate as well.
But I'll say again, it is a concern here in Arcata.
yeah.
I'll just flag that we kind of had this conversation with the city council late last year, and I think we reduced the requirement, but the city council wanted to keep some sort of requirement, and so we can talk to them again about it. But I think we were all the same people when we made that decision last time, so I don't know if everyone's moods have changed that much in the last few months, but yeah.
I'll just add to that. I think there was a compact that we made with the community about gentrification and inclusionary zoning's role in that. I think we may need to revisit that, because if inclusionary zoning is preventing housing development, we don't have to worry about gentrification at that point. We have to worry more about not having places to live. So I do think it's a relevant conversation to have, and I think several council members, I think, are equally concerned about it.
Indoor bike parking. I think it's a great idea. I think that having one bike parking spot for each bedroom is a fine idea, and I think we should support it.
Strongly seconded.
Yeah, and where are we on that one? I don't remember. Like in the gateway, isn't there quite a bit of?
There's a requirement in the gateway code that one indoor secured bike parking space be provided for each bedroom. And staff has some concerns about that. I personally and professionally have concerns about the impact that may have on housing development as well. We have one project to date that has built bike parking, not because it was a requirement, but because they thought the community wanted it, and it's not used right now. And I think they've had some theft issues because it's like one open space, and providing each individual bedroom its own bicycle parking locker would, take some significant space resources that could otherwise go towards housing, or open space or other community needs. So I think it's a live conversation. I hear that, there's some folks on the commission that really want to see it. I think that y'all should have that conversation again with the council.
Is there currently a proposed minimum number of units where this would become a requirement, or is it the proposal that
It's just right now, the way that it's written, it's just if you build housing, you have one indoor locked space per bedroom, and that's a space roughly, bike locker is what, like 2.5 feet by about 10 feet or so, by
it's big,
4 feet tall.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think about the Cal Poly housing and that whole big structure that's all for bikes, and I think at a scale that large it is economic, where you can have so many. But if you're talking about a smaller lot, that is hard for it to be an indoor space. And I wonder if there's any sort of don't get me wrong, I love bikes and I think it's really important to have bikes and bike parking, but I'm just curious for a smaller development, if it is possible to have kind of lower standards for that bike parking, whether it's just some sort of outdoor covered rack or something. I don't know.
I guess I need to better understand. I used to live in an apartment in Arcata, and the apartment had individual parking spaces for cars, and 2 of those parking spaces had been converted into a bike locker that had 30 bikes in it, because that's how many bikes you can fit in 2 car parking spaces. And so I know that it takes up space, but I think as we are getting rid of, hopefully, all of this car parking, it's okay to have a little bit of that space that we just freed up go to bicycle parking. I think also with, taller buildings, we've talked before about, people are going to store it in their rooms, but do you want the bike going up and down the elevator and that kind of thing? I worry that we're going to try to build the bikeable, walkable place and then not have places for people to
put
park
bikes.
and bike and that sort of stuff. And I know we're in a transition, and so that's there's a but yeah, that's my
It's I think it's something that maybe warrants more conversation. I mean, I would feel distraught if I lived in an apartment building and didn't have a place to park my bikes. I have more than one bike, and so I totally empathize, but I also would not park my bikes anywhere where other people had access to them, because I feel like they wouldn't be safe. Even if it was indoor to the building, so I'm,
A railing.
It's got to be locked.
well, it does have to be locked. And again, I've had, many bikes, and I've had many bikes stolen in my life. They have these, you can get an angle grinder from Harbor Freight for $20 that is going to generate, thousands of dollars worth of stolen bikes for you. You can cut through the most expensive bike lock like it's butter with those things. And so I think that when people have, the expectation that they're parking a bike in a safe, secure place, and maybe I'm just misunderstanding the impact or the idea here, but I was thinking it was like, I have a place to put my bike. And if I didn't, and I lived in an apartment building, I would find a place to put the bike inside my apartment because I wouldn't trust it to be out in the open. I can park my car. A car is a lot harder to steal than a bike. I can park my car in a parking spot. I could park 10 bikes in a parking spot, the same space. But if I had to park my bike with your bike and 8 other people, I would have concerns about that. So I just, warrants maybe a little more conversation. Is one bike space per bedroom the right number? What does that secured bike parking look like?
I'm envisioning a bike locker that, is enclosed.
Yeah, that you can park your bike in.
Right.
Yeah, that's a lot of space. In particular, because really to make those accessible, you have to have them all be ground level. You're not expecting people to pick their bike up and put it in top. I feel like there's a lot of rabbit holes we can go down with this, and maybe we should have some sidebar conversations before coming back on the planning commission city council meeting on the 8th.
It'd be interesting to know what some other communities like Davis, what's their code read on this kind of a thing.
If I may jump in briefly, what struck me with this comment was just the use of the term indoor. For me, I wanted to know if that was intentional, or it's we talk about covered and secure spaces, but they don't necessarily need to be like conditioned space indoor. We look at Cal Green, there are standards for bicycle parking. So they're sort of tried and true, right? But if we talk about indoor, that's a little bit different. And especially if we're eliminating parking minimums, then that space that might be there anyway, where you park a car, it might not be built, right? So that might be a builder might think, oh no, I need more indoor space. So if it's consistent with the intent, you might want to change that to covered and secured. If there's an overhang, and then that the wall of bikes can be parked against it, and maybe there's a gate, but it's not really indoor.
Yeah,
And
good point.
the secured is important too, right? So maybe there's a security camera or something to deter theft, right? Because
And I also just want to say that, like, as we're moving into a lot more people having like electric bikes and cargo bikes, like the size requirements for these, so I think just like considering what is optimal and all of that.
do you want to go on to your next one, Peter?
Yeah, my last one is wood burning stoves. You've already heard some of my polemics about this. I think wood burning has to end eventually in Arcata. And I realize that we have a long history. We live in a forested area. We have a long history of using wood for heat in Arcata. But I quote from the air quality element, this community values clean air, and wood smoke is not clean air. And it's particularly dangerous to health, especially the small particles, the PM 2.5s. And if you've lived in Arcata long enough, you realize, and I can remember many days walking to the university on a winter day, and the smoke is just sitting on the city, and as the sun is rising, you can just see this layer of wood smoke. So we're all breathing it, and it's not healthy. And I'm glad that we're eliminating wood stoves in new construction, but we should eliminate them I think we should eliminate them as a replacement technology too. If you're trying to replace your old wood stove, you should change to a different form of heat, either a heat pump or a gas heater. Either one, I mean, a gas heater is still contributes to climate change, but it's way better for our health.
Any thoughts on this one?
I appreciate the concern for our health. I don't have any strong comments.
I'm remembering back to this conversation because I think there were concerns about replacing an existing appliance in this way. And and then there were concerns about affordability too. I'm flagging what the city council said last time we tried to do this.
Yeah, I think the concern the city council had was if we were to prohibit wood stoves entirely, including replacements, that would lead to bad outcomes for vulnerable people who can't afford to take on a new technology. They would either, leave their existing wood burning stove that isn't functioning well and creating poor indoor air quality, because they know they can't replace it. That people would basically try and, skirt the rules and get them installed without the benefit of a building permit. And we wouldn't know about them because they, couldn't afford other technologies. I think that was kind of one of the primary concerns. So allowing people to replace a stove if it's failing, but not allowing new construction to include a wood stove.
I wonder if there's a sort of softer city policy of, pointing folks towards RCEA is about to do rebates for, improvements to homes, particularly for low income people around electrification and weatherization and things like that. And so the city could, kind of be more proactive in saying like, hey, like we really think you'd be better off without this wood stove. Like here's where you could get payment for one, like kind of more of an official sort of, instead of saying like, no, you can't in that sort of situation, like being sort of more carrot than stick, if that makes sense.
We can definitely do that. And I know that, one of the ideas that came up was not only around just the cost of replacing the technology, but there's the wood program. So low income seniors can get free wood through the winter. No one's going to be giving them free electricity or, gas to run a new appliance. So I think that was kind of the idea, but yeah, no, we definitely want to promote RCA's programs as much as we can. But to your point, Commissioner Lehman, I think that it's a good conversation to bring up to the council again.
Okay. Well, Abby also submitted comments, but a lot of them are pretty, I think we can get sort of, either we can give comments saying we really don't like them or we really do like them to the city council on June 9th. I don't know if we have to go through them in this play-by-play sort of way. Abby, when you watch this, you can email me to tell me you disagree.
I don't quite remember how much of them dovetail. Most of them do with stuff we just covered, right?
Yeah. So I think with that, I'm realizing now at the very end of this that I never opened this item for public comment, I don't think.
Now's a great time.
Is there anyone online watching us deliberate all this?
There is one person online.
Okay. Commenter, if you would like to comment on this item, please raise your hand. You will have 3 minutes to speak.
Go ahead, Dan.
Hey, yeah, hi, I'm Dan Shaheen. I'm wondering where pellet stoves factor in. Do those count as a wood burning stove under this proposed legislation? Thanks. They are often, mine is EPA rated and are considered an low emission alternative. So I'd like to hear how that factors in. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Anyone else online?
Nope, that's it. And I can certainly address the question if you're.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, wood pellet stoves would be considered part of that prohibition as well.
And to be clear, the current prohibition is only on new construction of these, not on anyone replacing an existing one.
Correct.
This was something to be discussed. Yeah.
And it currently includes EPA rated appliances as well. So that's still considered prohibited unless we receive guidance to suggest otherwise, even though the California Green Building Code does have examples of technology that would be considered clean burning. So not allowed currently.
Okay. Well, with that, I think we can call this a really productive meeting and close this item. Do we have any correspondence from commissioners? All right. Do we have any correspondence from staff? All right. Thank you, everyone, for a really productive, thoughtful meeting.
June 8th at 5, right? Is that correct?
I'll be sending out the invite to you, but I believe I want to say it's June 8th at, give me one moment.
As he's looking that up, I thought of a communication for the commission. Very important comments. I wanted just to remind the commission and for anybody who may listen to this after the fact that the open house related to reconnecting Arcata and the Valley West Form-Based Code is happening this Friday from 4 to 6 at the D Street Community Center. So we would encourage you to attend and tell your friends. It won't be the last opportunity.
There's also something happening at the market on Saturday around reconnecting Arcata.
I don't know.
I saw a note about potentially tabling there, but maybe that I did not verify that. But I saw a bunch of community engagement events and was
That'll
on
be
my calendar.
That'll be a surprise to us all then.
Yeah.
You will also have an opportunity if you go to the open house that Dilo mentioned to participate in engagement on the Valley West Form-Based Code. It is at 5 o'clock on June 8th.
Okay, everyone. Thank you again. With that, this meeting is adjourned.